Good evening, everybody. And welcome to the second night of the Savannah Book Festival. If you were here last night for our opening with George and Paula Saunders, you already know my name is Bo Anders, and I'm the president of the Book Festival Board of Directors. If you were not with us, please let me say again, on behalf of my fellow board members and the more than 250 volunteers who help make this festival a reality every year, we're delighted you're here for our keynote address with Chris Stirewalt. We were sad that Daniel Krauthammer had to reschedule his appearance at the book festival due to a family emergency, and I want to personally thank Chris for stepping up with just 3 days' notice. Please hold on to your tickets for tonight, because as we have announced, Daniel Krauthammer is rescheduled for Monday, March 11th at 6 o'clock right here in the Lucas. Your original ticket for tonight will be honored at the entrance at that time. We're thrilled that Daniel was able to reschedule that visit to Savannah. The festival wouldn't be able to bring amazing voices like George and Paula Saunders, Lynn Vincent, and Sarah Vladeck to our beautiful city without the generosity of Georgia Power, David and Nancy Cintron, the Sheehan Family Foundation, Mark and Pat Suen, and the Philip E. and Nancy B. Beckman Foundation. We truly appreciate your support. Tonight, we also remember David Sobjan, an ardent supporter of the Savannah Book Festival and a board member, and thank you, Mara and the Sobjan family, for sponsoring our keynote speaker. We also thank our donors and volunteers who contribute their time and financial resources that in turn enable the festival to bring such noteworthy authors, make our authors feel welcome, and keep the majority of festival events free and open to the public, and ticketed events reasonably priced. Though I can't name you all, please know that you are greatly appreciated. I have a few more special thanks. First to the festival's executive director, Kim Bacchius-Suen, assistant director Erica Donger, and executive assistant Tara Setter, for putting in countless hours to make this festival happen. Can we give them some applause? And finally, to the members of Afterwards, the Odd Couples, and the Best Little Book Club in town for ushering all of you to your seats into this crowded theater tonight. Thank you for them as well. Let's applaud for them. And a very special thank you to the 33 authors who arrived early this year to participate in SBF at schools. Through this program, festival authors visited public and private middle and high schools and universities in our community, giving Savannah students a chance to interact with nationally recognized and prize-winning authors. As the author sponsors will attest, this is one of the most rewarding opportunities we experience. We're also excited to host the first Savannah Book Festival Children's Tent, which is co-sponsored with the Live Oaks Public Libraries and the Library Foundation, which is on Sunday at 1 to 4 right behind the theater. If you need help in planning your Saturday strategy tomorrow, be sure to pick up a copy of Do Savannah from yesterday's edition of the Morning News. The editors have created a handy pull-out section that'll help as a user-friendly guide for the festival. Or even better, download the Savannah Book Festival app. Just search Book Festival, Savannah Book Festival in the App Store or Google Play. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping items. One is please turn off your phones. We also ask that you do not use flash photography. And for the Q&A period, we ask that you raise your hand and one of the volunteers will bring you a microphone and I will acknowledge you to pose your one question. And immediately following the presentation, Mr. Stirewalt will be signing festival purchased copies of his book. A numbered signing card was provided when you purchased the book from Ex Libris. Now, for tonight's keynote address, I'd like to introduce Virginia Prescott. Virginia Prescott, the Gracie Award-winning host on Second Thought for Georgia Public Broadcasting. Before joining Georgia Public Broadcasting, she was the host of Word of Mouth, Writers on a New England Stage, and the iTunes Top 10 Podcasts of Civics 101 and the 10-Minute Writers Workshop on New Hampshire Public Radio. Please join me in welcoming Virginia Prescott.
Good evening. I'm thrilled to be here to introduce Chris Stirewalt, and really happy to be here at the Savannah Book Festival for the first time. Since he is a great fan of personal liberty, I will take the liberty of condensing his message for contemporary America into 2 words: stop panicking. Yes, democratic norms are being constantly upended. Yes, political decorum defied. Vicious insults and accusations made that contradict policy, charges of executive overreach, plenty of declarations of government institutions crumbling, and the country cleaved in two and going to hell in a handbasket. As political editor for Fox News and co-host with Dana Perino of I'll Tell You What, the podcast, Mr. Stirewalt addresses the partisan panic daily, but his book, Every Man a King, takes the long view and says, we have been here before. In fact, it is part of us. Populism rises and falls and rises again based on the will of the people and rejection of the elites. It is a corrective for governments gone wrong, a steam valve that begins to clatter when skepticism and resentment are turned up to 11 and ready to blow. Every Man a King borrows a phrase popularized by Huey Long, who in turn lifted it from William Jennings Bryan, 2 leaders of political upheavals that are covered in his sharply observed details and enlivened by his characteristic humor in the book. He follows Andrew Jackson, Theodore Roosevelt, George Wallace, Pat Buchanan, and Ross Perot, representing conservatism, liberalism, nationalism, and flagrant bigotry. These men jolted the body politic, perhaps leaving it weakened and in need of intensive recovery, but alive to fight another day. Stirewalt argues that a government focused on political equality, natural rights, and the sovereignty of the people would not be threatened by this parade of what he calls charismatic leaders, characters, crooks, cranks, and sometimes charlatans. Those who gain purchase through their ability to convince millions of ordinary Americans that the system is rigged against them, that they alone can fix it, and that the urgent call to action can still make every man a king. Donald Trump ran on those promises that he alone could fix a broken America. His presidency has been met with utter despair and with bellicose enthusiasm, and he is not the subject of this book. But that chasm between these 2 groups is echoed every day on traditional and new forms of media millions of times as evidence of an unprecedented partisan divide. Unprecedented? Well, you are about to hear a different narrative and perspective from Chris Stirewalt. So don't panic. You're about to hear, Chris, that we've been here before. We'll probably be here again, and we're going to have a heck of a good time hearing about it. So please join me in a hearty Savannah Book Festival welcome for Chris Stirewalt.
That wasn't that good. I thought you all could have done better, but that's all right. I'll take it. It's like a 7. Have you ever heard the expression that you could listen to somebody read a phone book? I could listen to Virginia talk all day. She is so good, and I thank her for that too kind welcome. Oh, she gets an 8. I'm a 7. She gets an 8. I see how it is. We can probably still be friends. 2 things are important to me. I want to be respectful of your time. Because I am very grateful that you have me here. But another thing is I need to steal from you so that when I go back and I'm on television, I can pretend like I'm in touch with America. And this is a crucial part of my phony act as a hillbilly pundit So I want to get to your questions. Your questions are sincerely more important to me than the rest of this because that's the part that's fun. So what I'm going to do, whether you like it or not, is I'm going to set a timer. And when the timer stops, I'll stop, and then we'll go to your questions. Is this a deal? Do we have a deal? In principle? Okay, all right. By the way, can I say, I think that Savannah's reputation as a party town is really in danger if you can get this many people to come to a lecture about populism on a Friday night. I think you guys are in a brand of trouble. You're in brand of trouble. But we'll do that, and then we'll do the other thing, okay? Okay. All right. I may or may not listen to it when it goes off. Okay. First of all, I know Daniel wanted to be here. It's important to him, and this book is important to him, and you're important to him. And he is such a nice person. He is such a good person that I know it pains his heart not to be with you tonight. And you should read his book, and you should buy his book. His father's wisdom for us is entirely, wholly, completely necessary for this moment. Charles Krauthammer, he said, politics is the moat and the wall that keeps the barbarians out, right? Politics isn't the city, it's not the purpose, it's not why we're here. And he said, and if you get the politics wrong, everything else dies. Nothing else is possible. Once you screw up the moat and the walls and the barbarians get into the city, none of the other good things that we care about, none of the things that are the actual objects of our life, our families, our professions, our love for our neighbors, the entertainments that we have, all of those things, they all die if you get the politics wrong. And what are we acting like now? We're acting like the politics are the point. We're acting like the actual purpose of the United States of America is to have politics. No, 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 do not, do not. In fact, the purpose of the United States is to have a government that allows us to be ourselves, to have the greatest portion of freedom, to have the greatest portion of all of those things. Buy Daniel's book, read Daniel's book, and listen to what his father had to say. His father, we need him now. Now, given the ample amount of time that I was given to prepare for these remarks, all good notes for speeches are prepared on bar receipts. This is a clear and obvious truth. Everyone knows this. This is how you do it. All right, I already made fun of you. That's covered. Okay, good. I've got that. Okay, who here has seen Saving Private Ryan? Okay, there are a few monsters here, but most of you have seen Saving Private Ryan, and therefore we do not have to have you deported, so this is good. At the end of Saving Private Ryan, spoiler alert, sorry, they save him, but at the end, Tom Hanks is dying, and Matt Damon, Private Ryan, is holding him, and he's there in this moment. And he says, is there anything I can do for you? And for any millennials or Gen Zs who are here, a whole platoon of men has died essentially to save the life of one person. And he says, is there anything I can do for you? And he's thinking like, can I get you some water? And Tom Hanks says, who remembers what Tom Hanks said? Earn this. Earn this. Earn all of the people who died so that you could live. Would you say that we as Americans today are living up to the legacy of the sacrifices of those men? No, not even close. Like, not even close. We're talking about a country that 1 million men and women at arms have died to create, preserve, protect, and defend, and we're treating it horribly. We're treating it like a plaything. We're smacking it around. We are tweeting about it. We are giving into these base animal passions. We are unworthy, specifically unworthy of those sacrifices. There is a Latin motto which this nation should take as its own, which is, be worthy of your heritage. Be worthy of your heritage. We are not, and we know it. And whether you're a liberal or a conservative or a Republican or a Democrat, we all know there's something wrong. We can feel the tear in the fabric, and we know it's there. The point of my book, the purpose of my book, the purpose of my professional life, the purpose of myself as a dad, the purpose of myself as a citizen, all has to flow into one thing, which is to heal and restore what's torn here. Because if we don't, and I'm not trying to be hyperbolic, but if we don't, you know what happens, right? The barbarians win. The wall falls. And when Abraham Lincoln, think about this. Sorry, Savannah, Abraham Lincoln. Too soon? Meh. I'll save my Sherman material for later. But think about this. When Abraham Lincoln said in his second inaugural, probably the finest work of political oratory in American history, and he starts out, and he says basically, you started it, we whipped you. Again, sorry. And then he said, we'll keep whipping you until it's done, until every drop of blood drawn by the lash is repaid by one drawn by the sword. And we'll keep going. And you're like, whoa, dude, this is very intense. And then at the very end, he says, with malice toward none and charity for all, let us bind up the wounds of a nation. And the closing stanza of this remarkable and brief piece of oratory is a call to forgiveness and is a call to reconciliation. And that's what he calls us to. And as he sits, you know, we just had his birthday this week, as he sits in marble repose, a judge across the mall looking down at the Capitol, looking at the White House, passing judgment, what he's calling us to always is that. But when Lincoln called the United States of America the last best hope of earth, it was a joke. It was a ridiculous assertion. A country ripped in two by civil war, not the strongest, not the mightiest, unable to maintain our own selves. We were not even able to be, this was like a teenager that was like, I'm probably the #1 best guy in the country after he's just wrecked your car. You're like, I think you should reassess. But when Lincoln called us the last best hope of earth, he was right. And if we fall, if this fails, another thing Lincoln said, that no invading army will ever take a drink from the Ohio without our failing ourselves first. We will have to defeat ourselves first before we're ever conquered. And aren't we doing a pretty daggone good job of it, right? Aren't we defeating ourselves only too well? All right, bar receipt. Oh yeah, what's populism? So populism is about grievance, right? Populism is when I'm aggrieved, I'm mad. Other people have rigged the game against me. I am the victim here. I am not heard, and I will make myself heard, and you will hear me, right? Populism is not, please listen. Populism is, you will hear me now. You will hear me. And the reality of this boom and bust cycle of American populism that dates back really to the founding. You know that at the founding, by the way, there were populists too. We talk about the Federalist Papers, and by the way, Lin-Manuel Miranda's ability to make Democrats love Alexander Hamilton is the most hilarious thing. I just find it, who knew that if you could rhyme Rochambeau, you could make Hillary Clinton love the Federalist Papers? But I'm, whatever it takes, I'm for him. There were anti-Federalist papers too, right? There were not just Federalist papers, there were anti-Federalist papers. There were people who said, you're gonna let these merchants in New York, you're gonna let these rich people, you're gonna let them choose against you. It's rigged, the game is rigged, it's a fraud. Don't do it. Well, how about this? Do we live in a democracy? No, what do we live in? A republic, yay! But we live in a democratic republic. Everybody in this room should be a Democrat, and everybody in this room should be a Republican. We should care to have a government produced by the will of the people that takes its legitimacy from the will of the people. But no one here wants to live in a country of the tyranny of the majority, right? Nobody here, I guarantee you that the founders would have never, ever gone for revolution if they thought that they would be ruled by the majority. And Edmund Burke and other philosophers of the time said, okay, as long as there's rules. And they said, well, maybe we should just have the will of the people. And then the French Revolution happened, and all of the Republicans were like, So we live in a democratic republic. We should all be Democrats. We should all be Republicans, small d's and small r's, and we should care about those things. Along the way, though, sometimes people feel like they're getting screwed, like they're getting ripped off, like the elites are conspiring against them to take away the stuff that matters. So populism is basically when grievance manifests itself in a political moment. For Americans, the best first, and the populism's greatest hero, Andrew Jackson, the one who in American populism led the first revolt. The joke about when Donald Trump hung Andrew Jackson's portrait in the Oval Office, he was trying to own the libs. And he owned them fairly well. He owns them on a fairly regular basis, the outrage and all of that. But I laughed so hard because I was like, wait, let me get this straight. Donald Trump has chosen the vanguard of an immigrant wave who changed the nation as his moniker, that this was going to be his exemplar for his presidency, laws. Like, are you serious? The single largest unforced migration of human beings in history to that point were my Scots-Irish ancestors who came to the United States and changed everything. 250,000 people from the north of Ireland came, Protestants, Presbyterians, came to the United States. They came to North Georgia. They came throughout Appalachia, through the Mid-South, out into Texas. They filled up the interior of the country, and they changed everything. And I will promise you that people who lived in nice coastal towns like Savannah did not care for the redneckery and hillbillydom that was taking place up there. We were definitely other. We were definitely other. And what Andrew Jackson did is one day, one of the things I find funny about the Democratic Party at this moment, they're like, yes, we just want all these Hispanic votes, and Hispanic voters just are going to vote Democrat, and it's going to be great. And it's like, no, the revolution will be that there will be a Hispanic president. Right? The Hispanic voters aren't going to come along and elect another old white person to be their president. This huge new immigrant boom that will be a third of the electorate in 15 or 20 years. What are they going to? They're going to have a Hispanic president. They're going to have their own Andrew Jackson. So immigration, so the populism works with immigration, but it doesn't always work the way you want it to. Certainly Donald Trump has benefited from the anxieties about native-born white voters, about the Hispanic influx, but that's probably not how that story ends. Bar receipt. Oh, I love this one. This is good. So, where are the richest counties in the United States? Yeah, baby, just keep it coming. You just back it up. Keep sending it our way. We like it. I used to live in Fairfax County, the second wealthiest county in the country. No clap, never clap, never clap. I am from Wheeling, West Virginia, and I don't ever want to be associated with that kind of business. But at the Safeway at the top of the GW Parkway, and it's like the elites within the elites within the elite of an elite. And the Safeway is hilarious. They have, sustainably sourced flooring and everything and the avocados are perfectly just curated and fantastic, and the arugula is so fluffy and you can't even stand it. It's so great. Now I love it because they have the best meat and I want to cook and smoke and eat all of it. But as I was standing appraising this perfectly fluffed arugula, a woman comes up to me and she says, Chris. And I knew that she was a Republican. I knew. Well, first of all, she knew who I was. Which in Washington, let me tell you, going about my business in Washington is not challenging because no one's watching Fox. I am safe the whole time. But she says, Chris, in this Soto voice, like, lest she be found out. But she said, Chris, you have to tell these people they can't vote for Donald Trump. It would be a disaster. And I said, ma'am, the next holler over from where I grew up is Windsor Heights, West Virginia. How is the job situation in Windsor Heights? Anybody think it's good? No jobs. If you were very lucky, you could get on at Roerig's landfill If you're supremely lucky, you could get a job driving a school bus for the county. That's it. Mine's gone. Mill's gone. They're not running corrugated steel down in Beach Bottom anymore. Nope. Okay. How is the church on Sunday? Empty. A couple of little old ladies sitting down in the front of the Methodist church. But that's it. How is the opioid situation? How's drug use? How about an illegitimacy rate in that part of the county approaching 70%? So no work, no church. Oh, where's the school? How's the school? Consolidated into a consolidation of a consolidation, and there hasn't been a school there for 20 years. So if I go tell an old timer, if I go tell some guy in Windsor Heights, well, you shouldn't, sir. Coming from the arugula aisle, we would tell you that you can't vote for Donald Trump because it would be a disaster. What is he going to say? You're too late. You're too late. It is. It is a disaster. And now we don't care. And in fact, hurting you, sticking it to you people in the arugula aisle has value to itself. And there you have populism. There you have the soul of populism seated right there, which is it is about grievance, and it's about anger, and it's about that. And that's just as true for Bernie Sanders and supporters of his, or Elizabeth Warren, who want to take it to Wall Street and take it to the banks and stick it to the people that they feel are ripping them off. It's just as true. And if we're going to have a good conversation about this stuff, we've got to be honest about what it is, and we've got to be honest about that part. And we're not being that way right now as a country. What we are doing is saying like, well, my stuff's okay, but your stuff's wrong. We are in a cycle. We are in a period where this populist, this turgid populism is finding purchase. There's a congresswoman from the Bronx. I can't remember her name. I've never heard about her. If only there was some coverage. Well, anyway. So I carry, or sitting over there on the platform, or on the podium, is a computer with more power than the computers that took men to the moon on the Apollo program. We all carry them in our pocket. I got inside of a steel tube in Washington, D.C. this morning, and after I ate peanuts, it brought me here an hour and a half later. It was cheap. It was easy. I mean, other than they take a picture of you naked to get on an airplane, which is so weird, but we do it anyway. Cool. We live in 52 years ago. It was illegal in 16 states for people of different races to get married. We have eradicated, anti-vaxxers, boo, but we have eradicated most of the diseases that plagued humankind throughout our history. We've never been richer, we've never been freer, we've never been more powerful. Crime is down, border crossings are down, everything's down. All the bad stuff's down mostly, and all the good stuff's up mostly. But we're miserable. And we're miserable with each other. And we're yelling at each other all the time. If what we thought was true, remember James Carville's line in 1992, it's the economy, stupid? Not true. Even when we're rich, even when the economy is good, even when things are, my joke is, we're dying of type 2 cultural diabetes. We're so rich, we're so fat, like, well, I'll have the veal Oscar, that's okay, I'll just do it anyway. We're so deep into this that we're making ourselves sick. We've made ourselves sick with these hatreds because you need something to bring animation to your life. Those hatreds, when you are content, when all of your Maslowian needs are met and those things are covered, it is those hatreds that burn bright. They crackle and they give warmth. And what we've learned, I'll shorthand it this way. When we meet populists, the first populist is Andrew Jackson, and it's about ethnicity, right? It's about my people versus your people. It's the very standard us versus them. But then as populism moves on into the 19th century, through the 19th century, what's it about? Money, income inequality, It's about, you will not crucify me on this cross of gold. It's about William Jennings Bryan, and it's about, and of course it is that way, very much so, because it's boom and bust and boom and bust. There's times of wealth and there's times, the late 19th century, the Gilded Age, amazing fortunes are made, amazing things happen, but these terrible crashes and calamities throw people out of work in mass numbers. The guy who shot William McKinley was crazy, but also, fair, but also he was a guy who got laid off at a mill somewhere, right? He got laid off in, I think, Pittsburgh? Buffalo. Who said Buffalo? My man. Leon Shogos. A cousin of yours, perhaps? No relation? And if the people back home heard that I mixed up Pittsburgh and Buffalo, I'd be in big trouble. But the economic populism dominated. And when we get to Teddy Roosevelt, who just went absolutely crazy, if there's ever been a story about a guy in politics, he leaves the presidency to William Howard Taft. Speaking of type 2 diabetes, he leaves the presidency to William Howard Taft, and then he left a stack of legislation for Taft. Roosevelt was just as crazy as a bedbug, and he left this stack for the Republican Congress and for Taft. This huge, like 1,500 pieces of legislation, and then leaves to go kill all of the animals in Africa, and then on a European tour. Then word reaches him that they're not doing what he told them. Don't you know that I told you to do these things? You know, it's like the supreme command. We listen to the supreme commander, right? That's why I follow. Whatever you tell me, I'll do. And then when he gets so mad, he runs for president again, splits the Republican Party into the populist, bull moose, and the Republicans, blows it up, and of course, the great joke. I will say this, just as an aside, I think we're on the 20th aside now, but as an aside to that aside, researching and doing this book, I came to have so much more respect for Taft and the way he dug his heels in. Being stubbornly unpopular, there's a lot of Nancy Pelosi in this William Howard Taft where it's like, no, seriously, where it's like, oh, I'm at 12%. Oh, no, whatever will I do? Oh, I guess I'll still be the Speaker of the House and slam the door in your face. The toughness of Taft in fighting back Teddy Roosevelt and keeping the Republican nomination. It was Roosevelt who gave us Woodrow Wilson. As my eldest son likes to say, there's a Woodrow Wilson Bridge spans the Potomac River south of Washington. And as my sons like to say, great bridge, terrible president. But it was, oh, he was bad. But anyway, it was Roosevelt who gave us Wilson, but it was Taft who preserved small r republicanism, because Wilson's message was pretty obvious. This way of doing business, having a republic is stupid. It's slow. We need to move fast. It's the modern era. We've got to get stuff done. Populism demands that we don't wait. We don't wait for Congress to act. We don't wait for the courts. We don't wait for consensus. We don't need the Electoral College. We don't need all this stuff. What we've got to do is act vigorously, quickly, now. Don't wait. Taft saved a piece of the opposition. And in losing that election, he saved a little piece of it. But anyway, we get to our friend Huey Long, who, if you don't love, like, it's a good, it's a good thing that Hitler was not as charming as Huey Long, or we would have lost the war 100%. Huey Long was a fascist, a demagogue, a lunatic, a crook, a swindler. He was the pits. He was the worst, most rotten kind of human being that you could imagine. Broderick Crawford's portrayal of him in All the King's Men makes it seem like he's kind of an okay guy, like, or that there's like a good person struck. No, just bad, just a strictly bad mammal. But if we think about, we're tracking this now through the 19th century into the 20th century, and we're moving forward, it's still about what? It's about money. They've got it. William Jennings Bryan, Teddy Roosevelt, and Huey Long. It's all about a chicken in every pot, a car in every garage, every man a king. We're going to take the money from the people what's got it, and we're going to give it to them. We're going to give it to them who ain't. And that's what we're going to do. And it's very straightforward. And if you have 4 panics followed by a worldwide depression, it turns out economic populism sells okay, right? But then something changes. And his name is George Wallace. And what changes is that we got a Federal Reserve Bank. We stopped having, we won 2 back-to-back World War champs. We won 2 world wars. We established a Federal Reserve Bank. We quit having panics. We haven't had we had a panic in 2008, but that was mostly like a sort of, no offense to millennials, that was like an existential, like, what are we really anymore? I'm not anti-millennial anyway. I am pro-millennial, and they will save us. Oh, well, I don't think that went off. That was probably a mistake. But I do want to turn this corner because I think it's important, because I think it's what we're struggling with right now. The first time George Wallace ran for the governorship of Alabama, he ran as a Huey Long populist. He borrowed lines from William Jennings Bryan and Huey Long. And the message was, we're going to take that money from those rich people and we're going to give it to everybody else. And he lost. He got crushed. And he said, after the fact, he said that I will never get out N-worded again. He had been, for Alabama of the 1950s, pretty progressive on race. He served on the board of the Tuskegee Institute. He had a reputation in his courtroom for basic fairness, treated African-American lawyers and defendants with dignity. Well, you better believe that his opponent used that against him and beat him with it. And he made a decision then and there, that day, that from then on, the virulent racism that was dying out was going to come back. And he was going to own it. And he was going to be the one, and he would use it. And you know what he found? It was enormously powerful. And it wasn't just powerful in the South. Grievance of a cultural kind, whether it was strictly about race, in some places like Boston or Milwaukee, it was about busing and about those actions, but a general sense that the old order of things was falling away, that the old order was threatened. And of course, if you were living in 1960s America, the old order was very much threatened, right? People who were not allowed to vote before are voting now. People who were not allowed to be in these places were allowed to be in other places, but also young people were disrespecting their elders. There were things, the things that we count on, the institutions, that social capital that we count on, we started cashing in, and to a lot of negative consequences. Is that my phone? No? I'm glad it wasn't more embarrassing if that was what was playing. What he found out was that cultural populism is even more powerful than economic populism, especially in a rich country. If your grievance is cultural, if your grievance is economic, once this panic is over, once the recession ends, cool, I'm good, I'm back to calming down. But there's never an end to it if it's a cultural grievance, because do you feel alienated? Do you feel like you're not in sync with things? Do you feel out of step with the times? Yes, you're a human being. Of course you feel all those ways. That is life. And if a politician can prey on those things and those anxieties, they can make you, if I can make you afraid, I can make you hate. And if I can make you hate, I can control you. It's a 1, 2, 3, and it works really well in politics. The old joke, you know what a politician does with his base? He treats it like mushrooms. You keep it in the dark and cover it with, C-SPAN's here, horse manure. Yoda was right. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to the dark side. Oh, right, so I am actually almost done. So Ross Perot, I just have to say a word about Ross Perot because he's so perfectly crazy. I just love him. You know that Ross Perot he was back in Texarkana to see whatever took him to Texarkana, and he saw his mother's house. She had moved down to Plano with him because by then he was richer than Croesus. And the person who bought his mother's house had painted it white. And so he hired a contractor and said, I want you to fix this. My mother's house is not supposed to be white. And they said, well, Mr. Perot, there's no way you can really take white paint off of brick. Once it's soaked in, you're there. And do you know what Ross Perot had him do? They turned the bricks around. They busted every brick out of that house and turned each one of them around so he would have Ross Perot's house. So in 2000, when Donald Trump ran for the Reform Party nomination, he ran, he said, to save the Reform Party from Pat Buchanan, who he said was a Nazi, who hated blacks, who hated Jews, and this is no good for Ross Perot's party, because Ross Perot's party was about economics, right? Ross Perot was no culture warrior. All of the questions he was asked about cultural issues, he botched, like, again and again and again, because as his haircut would demonstrate, he didn't spend a lot of time thinking about other people's opinions. And when Donald Trump ran in 2000, it was to save the Reform Party from Pat Buchanan. And then we met Donald Trump again in 2012 with the birther thing, and he was Pat Buchanan. He learned. He learned what Pat Buchanan learned from George Wallace, which is cultural division works better than economic concerns, because economic concerns are situational. It's the economy, stupid, doesn't work if you're at 4% GDP growth. But are you afraid of your neighbor? Are you afraid of something bad that's happening in your country? Are you afraid of the way the kids are acting? Are you afraid? Works. Buchanan knew it. He taught Nixon to do it in '72. He took, you know, Nixon's favorite, the last meal that Nixon ate at the White House was cottage cheese with ketchup on it. And you're like, well, you should have resigned, sir. You should have resigned. But Buchanan taught Nixon, and Trump learned from Buchanan, and it works. And so populism, it comes and it goes. And as long as we're rich and prosperous, we can count on the fact that there'll be a lot of cultural populism going on. Currently on the left side in the country, it's about intersectionality, and it's about feminism and racism and those grievances. And that energy is, and you can feel it, right? You can, with what's happening in Virginia right now, and you can feel this energy. And when the mob comes, you know, Ralph Northam, I'm sorry, the cameras may be here. I have never seen a dumber politician, and I am sorry. I have never, this is it's just, it's very special to see somebody who's this bad at their job. But the cultural grievance on the left now is also about it's about race, and it's about feminism, and it's potent too. And you see Kristen Gillibrand getting her candidacy going, and she's like, no, if you're a woman, what was wrong with Hillary Clinton's campaign? A lot. One of the things that was wrong with Hillary Clinton's campaign, Wisconsin's a state, but another thing is, I'm with her? No, she's with you. She's supposed to be for you. You're not supposed to be with her. She's supposed to be for you. But Gillibrand is embracing that brand. Cory Booker announces on the first day of Black History Month and very much makes that like his, when you put Frederick Douglass in your announcement video, you may be on message. So that's the energy that's on the left right now, even more so than the economic grievances that Bernie Sanders is talking about. But anyway, I will comply. I am now entering the compliance phase. Okay, so Abraham Lincoln wins the election. And if anyone could have been a demagogue and a populist, absolute, C-SPAN, sorry, it would be Abraham Lincoln. The country was ripped apart. Constitutional and legal norms were shredded. I love Southerners. I love you guys because you're like, well, he suspended the writ of habeas corpus in Maryland. I'm like, you seceded. Okay, so like we have to have an order of things here. Lincoln could have easily been a demagogue, and he had the gifts for it. He was brilliant. He was a great orator. He was all of those things. But he wasn't. At our weakest moment, in 1860 and 1861, at our absolute weakest moment, where we were the most vulnerable to all of this stuff, even more so in the 30s when Huey Long almost took us for a bad ride, Abraham Lincoln didn't, and he wouldn't. Lincoln, I should have put this in the book, Lincoln said one time, I have no political idea that does not descend from the Declaration of Independence. And it's like goosebumps, like woo boy, right? So all the rich people have a peace conference at the Willard Hotel in Washington. Recommend the Round Robin Bar, very good, good receipts. But they had a parley at the Willard, and I think John Dodge, but basically the richest man, the Jeff Bezos of his day. And all of the richies got together and they met and they came up with some cockamamie extra constitutional concept to somehow avert the war, right? We're just, you know, Lincoln's election had angered and we're on our way. And so they come to present their findings to Lincoln, who's waiting to, and he, by the way, has had to sneak into the Capitol because he knew he'd be murdered. So he is in Washington and they come to him and they lay out their thing, and a man who would end up, a good friend of Lincoln's, was there. And they come to Lincoln and they lay out, the rich people tell him what he ought to do. This hick, this hayseed in his black broadcloth suit, and they tell him all this stuff. I will definitely choke up reading this. I will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. It is not the Constitution as I would like to have it, but it is that is to be defended. The Constitution will not be preserved and defended until it is enforced and obeyed in every part of every one of the United States. It must be so respected, obeyed, enforced, and defended, and let the grass grow where it may. So there is an answer. There is a solution. And the solution is we have a great charter. We have a great founding document. And it works. And if we follow it and we listen to it and we treat it with respect, it will see us through for another century and through other hard times. And when we get whipped up and mad and go, by the way, just stop with the Twitter people. But if we pay attention, it will work. And I have only one more request of you before I get to your questions. Teach children how to use the Constitution. Teach children how to use the government. Teach children the history of their country. This is not teachers' fault. Schools are burdened with every imaginable duty and everything that we can think of. We tell them to be moral instructors. We tell them how to teach, how to wash their behinds. We tell them we want schools to do everything, and then we complain when they don't do it all. I am putting it on you in this room tonight. Demand civics education. Demand it. Do it yourself. Do it through your church. Do it through your mosque. Do it through your temple. Do it through the Boy Scouts. Do it through anything that you can. Because I promise you, the biggest problem confronting us now is that another generation is rising up that does not understand the focus and the potency of what Abraham Lincoln said. And when the next person comes along that says, well, 51% of the people want it, so we're just going to eat your liver. No. No matter what, you cannot vote to make me a slave. You cannot vote to do these things because the Constitution forbids it. So my plea, my entreaty to you tonight, other than giving me good material to rip off, is demand civics education and do it yourself if you have to. Okay? Deal? Yay. Okay. Thank you. All right, I'm not going anywhere. Don't steal my water. I spit in that. Okay.
Great job, Chris. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A lot of lessons in there for us. You gonna?
No, go ahead. I think that's a good idea. I agree completely.
Okay, can we turn up the lights, please? We have people in the audience with microphones. Do we have any questions? Raise your hand.
Be nice.
You must have covered everything, Chris.
Chris,
Yes?
given your analysis, is there any possibility that a centrist candidate can succeed in 2020?
We had Howard Schultz in the Bureau yesterday and talked with him. And you know what he sounded like? He sounded like a Georgia Democrat, or the old school, the way they used to be. And I think he's very right that his party left him more than he left his party. The problem If Ross Perot hadn't been crazy, I think he might have won Missouri. I think he might have won Kentucky. I think he might have won border states. I think he might have won in the middle. The issue that Schultz, and if I ask, if we say, you guys want to go out for dinner after this? Everybody's like, yeah, right? We would all want to go out for dinner because I'm fat and I like that. But then we say, okay, you want to go out for dinner. And then if you say, let's get Chinese, and I say, no, I want barbecue. Now, obviously, I'm going to win because barbecue is better than Chinese, except for Chinese barbecue, which is really good. But if somebody else comes along and says, no, something else. There's a bar I know that's called Someplace Else, and I love that name because where do you want to go? Let's go someplace else. Something else always beats what you've got. But the problem then becomes once you put a name on it and a face on it, what happens? People say, I don't really like that much. And we live in an era of negative partisanship where people are shoved very deeply into their spaces. Getting them to come out, you would almost have to have a James Mattis. You'd have to have a figure who is so esteemed and so respected that he or she could pull it off that way. But it's a very hard space. Like if anybody can tell me the state that Howard Schultz is going to win, I'm ready for the next round of the discussion. But I don't think so. Okay, who else?
Raise your hand.
Down in front.
Here's one down here.
Got a hot ticket.
One over here.
Chris?
Yes, sir.
I worked for Ross Perot for about 20 years.
Oh.
We have several other people that work for Ross Perot.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was funning. I apologize. I'm sorry.
He was one of the best protectors of his people.
He was. And the stuff that he did with Iran and the stuff that he did for, do you know about the planes going over to Vietnam and getting them, I mean, I should say I was having a good time because I was teasing everybody. Ross Perot, what he did for American service members, what he did for his employees, and what he did at his company is a miracle, and his son is doing great stuff today. And I apologize. I'm sorry.
No. The only question I have for you, do you think he would have made a great dictator for the country?
You're my new favorite person in Savannah. That's very good. That's very good. Who else?
There's some over here.
We got a cluster. We got a hot zone. Hand it over. $5 for beer, $3 for hot dogs.
Thank you, Chris.
Yes, sir.
You
didn't work for William Jennings Bryan, did you?
No.
Okay, good.
No, but I thought the movie was a great movie anyway, Gone with the Wind. I should inherit the wind. I disagree with a lot of what you said about populism here, but the thing that I see as the son of two survivors of the Holocaust are the spread of populism elsewhere in this world where they don't accept governmental norms,
right,
where they yank everybody out of the Supreme Court or eliminate the Supreme Court, where they eliminate the legislature,
yep,
and such. And my concern is that we might reach a point in this country where we're so busy fighting ourselves that we're not going to be willing to fight where we really do have to fight, and that is for, you know, the good for the rest of the world. And I'm not talking about a world war, but...
No, but what we talked about, we were talking about Saving Private Ryan. Why were we there? Is this a country that would still stand up to fascism elsewhere in the world? I always disliked the Bush administration's term global war on terror. That would have been like calling World War II the global war on tanks, right? Terror is a methodology, right? We were talking about an ideology. We were talking about Islamist radicalism. That was really what they meant, but they didn't want to say it because it's not cool. But that's what they meant. Populism is not an ideology. Populism is a methodology. There are liberal populists, there are conservative populists, there are cultural, there are economic. It's just a thing. It's a way that if I can get everybody in here angry, and then we're going to storm out these doors, we're going to go tell them what we think. The pitchfork is the weapon. It's not the ideation. And I am deeply concerned about what's happening. Social media has just begun to wreck us and the whole world, right? We see what's possible now. We see what happens with the untruths. We see what happens with the damage that's done. We look at somebody like Orban in Hungary. We talk about what's going on. It's happening. The Silicon Valley, promised us that social media and connectivity would bring to light all of these beautiful things. What it did was let the cockroaches run crazy, right? And it really does. We are in a period of serious technological lag. The last time we were here, you know what happened? 2 world wars, a Holocaust, 150 million people dead, Mao's Great Leap Forward. The consequences, the downstream consequences of the Industrial Revolution were enormous. Horrible. The era of horrors. The 20th century was the era of horrors. Let's not do that again. Let's not let the consequence of the information revolution be the same as it was for the Industrial Revolution. And it's up to the United States, the last best hope of Earth, more than any other country in the world, to do that work, I believe.
Right down there in front.
Chris, care to make an early prediction on who the Democratic nominee will be?
Well, what do you give me? Oh, okay. I'll do it for Buffalo Wings. I think Kamala Harris is going to be pretty hard to beat. I think she's going to be pretty hard to beat. I think she's pretty gifted. I think she's good at politics. If you asked 9 out of 10 politicians whether they smoked weed, it would be like a 2-day, like there would be paper statements, and she was like, oh yeah, my dad's Jamaican, I definitely smoked pot. And you're like, did you just say that? And she's like, yeah. And she did it, and it landed, and it was okay. I would just put a general rule of thumb. Don't look at who's best, look at who's getting better. When the Democrats find themselves in a very analogous situation the Republicans were in 2016, this is a pig pile. It's a total pig pile. You can say there's a front runner, but it's for today. And the other thing that's going to happen is as they go, they're going to kill each other. The best thing that Donald Trump has going for him is the throat-cutting, savage, brutal throat-cutting that is about to take place. And by the way, speaking of Kristen Gillibrand, watch her. She'll be the one dropping the knife. Oh, was that me? I didn't do that. Sorry. Ask Al Franken. Look at who gets better. As Trump ran in 2016, he started out and it was like, what? But as he went, he was like, oh, these are the rules of the game. This is what I say to get on TV. This is what I say to go there. This is what I say to do this. And then this works. And so he just learned. Look and see who's a learning animal. And that's the one that you can bet, because this is going to be a hideous slog. This is going to be, and by the way, to your earlier question, sir, the best argument that you could end up with somebody who is not of these two parties is that that Trump is hit under the waterline. The economy, Mueller, like something very bad happens, or he does it to himself, but that Trump is listing and the Democrats fail. And if that happens, then that space opens up.
Do we have anybody up in the balcony with a question?
Green sweater.
So, often during your presentation, you spoke about elite, all right? And
You people, yes. We define the elites as people who wear sweaters like that. That's how we do it. It's pretty simple. We didn't want to give it away, but you asked, so that's why it's golf sweater. Once you wear a golf sweater, Brit Hume. It's the Hume rule that we have. If you have a sweater like that, you're an elite. This is true. What's an elite? An elite is somebody who has something I don't, and I resent them for it. That's what an elite is. An elite is somebody who's got something I don't, and I think it's ill-gotten. Because we don't use the term elites when we aren't being nice, right? What did what's his name, Schultz say, he's like, well, I don't think we want to use the term billionaire. And they're like, yeah, I think we do want to use the term billionaire, Mr. Schultz. It's like people of means, people with success. We use other words. Elite is a pejorative, right? You wouldn't call somebody the elites. You wouldn't call a group of people the elites if you were being nice to them. So it's an expression of that grievance. Unfortunately for us, if we make the penalty, I hate the way people dress at work now. I hate the way they dress at work. It makes me crazy. Shine your shoes, put on a necktie, act like you care to be there and respect other people's time. Act like you think that what you're doing is of value because that's a reflection on what they're doing too. And when I see young people, when I saw a guy at the bureau one time, don't tell anybody I told you this story, but I saw a guy at our bureau one time and he wore tennis shoes to work and he did not have a great day. The rest of his day was not a great day because this matters. So we have a problem now, which is nobody wants to be elite. Nobody wants to be the best. We all want to be the best, but we all want to act like we're not. Like Bill Gates could walk into the trashiest bar in Wheeling, West Virginia, and people would look at this guy and be like, who's this schlub? Who's this guy that walks in here? He doesn't look elite. He wants to look not elite. So we got to bring back, we shouldn't bring back elitism per se, but we should bring back a love for success and a love for people who are people of accomplishment.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Another balcony.
A balcony question?
Oh, we got a light on him. Okay, balcony.
A question. If an ultimate goal of any living biological form is survival, and Maslow's hierarchy teaches us that food and shelter, or fuel and living environment, are vital factors needed for survival, what are the real causes of our anxiety, internal chaos, perceived scarcity, and the epidemics of Alzheimer's, diabetes, cancer, and heart disease that we are experiencing in this country?
And you can do that in 1 minute.
I couldn't even see the questioner, so I feel like this is what the final judgment will be when I get at the end, at the resurrection, this will be what the voice will sound like, a pleasant voice, but with a hard question. Simply put, the object of every human heart, well, you left out one thing. Where's my questioner? Okay. You left one out of Maslow's list, and I know this is a family place, and you left it out. This is a family event, but Maslow had one other that she didn't mention. But anyway, the object of every human heart is to be truly known and truly loved. And we're all afraid that if we're truly known, we'll be unlovable. And we're all afraid that if we're loved, it will be for the wrong reasons. Because we are deeply insecure beings. Because we are shot through with those fears and anxieties. But our heart, Chuck Colson called it the God-shaped void, but our heart, all of our hearts want the same thing. All of our hearts cry out for that love, the unconditional love, the love that we try to model to our children as parents. And we need strong social capital to create a culture. Politics is way downstream of culture, way downstream of culture. Our broken culture is the headwaters of our broken politics. It's not the other way around. Our broken politics makes it worse, but it's our broken hearts. We are a soul-sick, a heartbroken country, not a poor country. We are a soul-sick and a broken-hearted country, not a country with a crime problem, or not a country with an external threat. Our threats are seated in the fears in our bosom, what we are really worried about. And those insecurities plague us, and then what do? We lash out at each other. Instead of being a point of light, instead of loving our brother or sister, instead of loving our neighbor as ourselves, we lash out because we're afraid that we will not be truly known and truly loved. And that soul sickness will never be fixed by politics. There is nothing in politics. And in fact, what we've done, I know I'm over a minute, but in fact, what we've done is that we have replaced more precious, more valuable, more meaningful things with the shoddy work of politics. And let's bring it all the way back around to Dr. Krauthammer. Politics is what lets us do the right things. It isn't the right thing. It's not the point of anything. We will never heal the heart and spirit of this country, ever, through politics. I promise. Good enough? Do I get in?
You're in.
Okay, she gives me like a 7. I'll take it. I'll take it.
Okay. Let's thank Chris again for that great presentation.
Thank you very much. You're too kind.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, we hope to see everybody on the squares tomorrow for a free day of 40 author presentations, and then back here on Sunday to see the Indianapolis presentation. Thank you for coming.